My name's T, and I'm looking for the greatest video game of all time. Today we're playing... Ugh, I have a confession to make. I love Lara Croft. I used to have a poster that came with Tomb Raider: The Last Revelations on my bedroom wall. I think it was encouraged by my parents who were trying to figure out if I was gay or not. She's a total asshole. She's rich because she made a bunch of money by stealing cultural artifacts and hunting species into extinction. I mean, she killed Bigfoot, for God's sake.
What's a man gotta do to get that kind of attention from you?
And let's face it, she definitely votes Tory. And if she aged at the same rate that we do, she'd probably be about 60 and writing articles for the Times about woke museums or something. In her first cutscene, she gets attacked by wolves, and then she jumps down to save the guy and just sprays bullets in his general direction. And she goes to examine him, and he's obviously dead. But let's face it, this guy doesn't look like he was mauled to death by dogs. Like, he definitely caught a stray bullet. But despite being a complete arsehole, she's so fucking cool, and that's really all that matters. I was never very good at these games as a kid, so I didn't play them that much, but I'm really glad I decided to revisit them because they are awesome. Now, usually if you're trying to explain to someone why a game is so good, you probably don't start with the tutorial, but the tutorial in Tomb Raider is one of the best I think I've ever played.
Welcome to my home. I'll take you on a guided tour. Use the D-pad to go into
It's a little bizarrely hidden in the menu as Lara's mansion, and I wonder how many people just started playing the game without even knowing this was a tutorial at first. And that would really suck, because as I said, the tutorial is great, but it's also very much needed.
Okay, let's do some tumbling. Press the jump button.
That's because the reason Tomb Raider is so much fun is that it feels so good to control Lara.
Now press it again and quickly press one of the directions and I'll jump that way.
Although she looks acrobatic doing all these flips, on the ground she's slow and has the turning circle of an 18-wheeler. She also sinks like a fucking rock. A lot of games of this era had particularly clunky controls, which could be very frustrating. But in Tomb Raider it has a point, and that's because when you get it right, her movement is extremely satisfying. And the whole process of mastery is what keeps you coming back to the challenge. And this tutorial teaches you everything you need to know incredibly quickly and only once.
The main hall. Sorry about the crates. I'm having some things put into storage and the delivery people haven't been yet.
And it's made especially cool because it's kind of set in a mock-up of her mansion. They flesh this out in later games and you can do like obstacle courses and lock the butler in the freezer and stuff. But those maybe more famous iterations of Lara's mansion trace their way all the way back to this original game. There are a couple of times when the tricky controls fall down. For example, you can't switch to walk mode if you're already running. So if you mess up the button order when you're trying to tiptoe towards a ledge, Lara will just gleefully skip to her death. Which is funny the first time, but when it happens a couple of times in the same place, it gets old quickly. Also in the tutorial, it originally made it sound like Lara's running jump works by detecting the ledge. I think she says, "Don't worry, I'll jump at the last second," or "I'll jump just in time," or something like that.
I won't actually jump until the last minute.
But this is because the back jump sets you up to the perfect distance, not because she knows where the edge of the ledge is. Which took me a few goes to figure out. But once you've got all this down, navigating through the levels feels amazing. And the levels for the most part are really great. They suffer sometimes from kind of old game design where it's not clear exactly where you're supposed to go. There's a level towards the start of the game where you have to find 3 gears to fix a lever that will divert the river. The gears are incredibly easy to miss because the textures are just so bad and they kind of blend into the floor. And as always with these game design problems, it's incredibly frustrating. But it's hard to be annoyed for long because the levels are just so 3D and dynamic. In the same level, diverting the river not only opens up the path forward, it fills up a separate reservoir, which if you came here early in the level without all the cogs like I did, you'll realise there's an opening which you can't reach yet. But when the chamber is flooded, you can swim in there and get to a secret room with a bunch of health kits and shotgun shells. I think that's just a really beautiful touch, and it makes the maps feel a bit more like real places. Briefly on the subject of water, swimming in this game is also super fun. Again, another frustration of a lot of games that came out around this time was like how janky and difficult underwater sections were. But the designers made a really genius decision to make Lara move really smoothly in the water. And given how walking normally feels like dragging a brick across the floor, this makes the water sections actually feel extremely liberating rather than frustrating. And as well, I never once felt let down by the camera, which again in an early-ish 3D game is really impressive. There's 4 areas, Peru, Greece, Egypt and Atlantis, and they all have their own different flavour, but also the levels that make up those areas also are very unique, and the game constantly is surprising me with its variety. You're just wandering along and then you're like, is that a fucking T-Rex? The biggest complaint I have about playing the game is actually the graphics. Now, I'm not here to dump on like a 90s game for having a low polygon count. I think that's actually absolutely fine. And I think Lara herself looks great. The problem is the textures. It varies from level to level and some of them are fine, but others are just migraine inducing. Like, look at this, it's so confused and painful to look at. And I had to take a rest from playing at some points because my eyes were just in pain. So as always, I've prepared some fun facts for you about Lara. Fun fact number 1. The original design for Tomb Raider's protagonist was a guy. However, he was a bit too similar to Indiana Jones, so to avoid any confusion, they changed her into a girl. And I'm glad, because although the game would still be great, mechanically speaking, Lara is so iconic to 90s gaming that it's actually hard for me to imagine. I was going to say a world without her, but that's probably a bit too far. Okay, fact number 2. Even when they made her into a female, a woman, they went through several stages of her design, and before she was British, she was actually going to be a South American called Lara Croft, but they ended up deciding to switch her nationality, which makes a lot of sense if you consider fun fact number 3, that despite all the comparisons to Indiana Jones, the two characters aren't really that similar to each other in their personality. And that's because Lara's personality was actually inspired by her fellow fictional Brit, James Bond. Given the time that Tomb Raider was released, it was probably based upon Pierce Brosnan's depiction, which is why she's so slick. As a young child of a dying, or I guess dead empire, that everything that I am socially conditioned to want to do. But yeah, overall, Tomb Raider is such a beautiful game, made with so much love and care, that is held back just by a few niggles that keep it from perfection. Still, that's just my opinion, and we have to check what the wise old owls at Metacritic have to say. Amadeus E says, "Still unique to this day, there's nothing else like the PS1 Tomb Raiders out there. The mysterious feel and atmosphere of the original Tomb Raiders hasn't been replicated to this day. Can't say the same for those 2010 reboot games, which were already unoriginal and generic the day they came out. Not games you want to go back to again and again either, unlike these original Tomb Raiders. 3 out of 10. And of course, we have to balance our negative review with a positive one. So here's one from Mark L, who says, "I believe that if you haven't completed this game, then you should bow your head in Shame. 9 out of 10. So, you heard it here first, that despite all the positives, Tomb Raider is not the greatest game of all time.